And welcome to the Barbara Gentry-Pugh Show. I am excited that you could join us today, and I have as my very special guest Mr. Calvin Mann. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you on the show, and I just appreciate you taking time to come out and share with our audience about all the wonderful things you're doing with our youth and your organization. He is the founder of Good Fathers Only Group, and he's here today to tell us all about that, what he's doing. And I consider it a very valuable investment that you're doing in the lives of young people. Mr. Mann is sort of a Detroiter. He grew up in Ferndale. He went to Ferndale High School. And so he's actually one of us. I think he grew up on the east side, he said, and then west side, east side, west side. West side, okay. And but the main thing is that he's here to talk about his organization. That he works with our youth, and it's a valuable service. He is the founder, as I said, of Good Fathers Only, and Mr. Mann is going to tell us all about Good Fathers Only, and when it was founded and why.
Well, it goes back to 2000. I say about, my son had to be about 11 or 12, and we were doing Little League football. And I just asked God that they be all that I know, good fathers. Mm-hmm. And so I took the time to build relationships with men who were good fathers. Okay. And so as time came along, I was dealing with a lawyer, and I jumped out here. I designed the logo, and I had it trademarked and everything. And then in 2008, at a Father's Day, Dad's Day Out event, I decided to release it. And we went from a t-shirt, had a basic t-shirt, and then that t-shirt led to all the other things that we do today.
Okay, but you had to have a passion for young men. It just didn't start with a t-shirt. It started with something inside of you that you wanted to help young men or help young men be good fathers.
Well, we really wanted to help men, period.
Men, period, okay.
Because it was a situation growing up. For me, I found that a lot of men had told me all the wrong things.
Okay.
And so for those that told me the right things, I had plenty of questions for. And so fatherhood was the only area. Me having a gospel icon as a father, and my mom, my relationship with my father was not as, not as active. And so missing that, I think that's where the passion came in, at seeing so many kids and so many men broken from not having participation of a father. Because I think we have it all wrong. We say that men are supposed to do all these things and provide. And then we say that men are supposed to not only provide that, then provide time, then provide all these other things. But it turns out that men may be the most valuable parent. According to the things that is taking place today, every home is missing one. And a lot of men have devalued themselves, and it's been tough on a lot of men. Mm-hmm. So my passion really just evolved over time, working with youth and men, and we're still striving to get better. We have one goal, but that's to unite fatherhood worldwide. And if we can pull that off, we can push back on some of the isms, some of the problems, some of the wars, and everything. But right now, society dictates how men interact.
Well, I understand clearly what you're saying in terms of fathers. I think statistics shows that if you did not have a father, you tend not to know how to be a father, especially if you didn't have any strong faith or strong Christian background. A lot of men don't know how to be a father. And then you have some that didn't have a father, but they made it their mission to be a good father because they wanted to give their children what they didn't have.
Right.
Do you find that more so with some of the fathers that you deal with today?
I think what defines fathers is time.
Okay, I agree.
As long as it's constructive time. We see a number of men involved with their involved in their kids' life in a lot of negative, destructive ways. Children are not to see everything, and today children are seeing everything, which makes it hard. But for men, fathers, we have come to understand some positives. A lot of positive. When a man is either involved or had custody of a child, the success of the child triples. When the father is in the home, the success of the child triples.
Whether he's good or bad, just
Whether
having a
he's
father
good or
in the
just
home.
having a father in the home. We would hope that they would be good. There are a lot of things that's shaping and tearing these relationships apart, and men are more and more. As a matter of fact, men are now making up 20% of the single family household rate, where the household rate was like 70, 75, 76. You know, it varies from year to year, but men are now making up 20% or more of the single family household rate.
What do you attribute that to?
First, I would say probably the number one recognition is that men involved in their religions have a tendency to pay a little more attention to what's going on.
So if they have a strong Christian faith,
know
something about what the Word of God says.
It really doesn't matter, because the way religion is set up, when men are more conscious, even if you go outside of religion and you look at the various groups and things like that, men are more involved. They're seeing that their value is directly connected to the kid. So that's just one of the things that I've recognized over the years.
Okay. I have a wonderful father. He was a pastor for, I think, over 60 years, and I have 5 brothers. And we were fortunate, but some families are not that fortunate.
Right.
And even having a good father doesn't always mean that the child is going to turn out to be a good child.
No, it doesn't.
So when you run across that kind of situation, how do you encourage, or how do you empower young men, young fathers,
when
listening, they're facing that kind of situation?
A lot of people do. A lot of young ladies do. A lot of young men do. It's listening. Parenting is one of those things that does not necessarily come with a manual, because each and every kid is different. Because one of the things I discovered is that, and while making a child, we ourselves may be on something totally different, and that process feeds through the DNA. So we don't understand that every kid is not the same. That's part of the problem in raising kids. We think that the formula that worked for kid 1 is not going to work for kid 4. And kid 3 might be that bad seed or bad kid or whatever the case may be, but there is something that turns that kid around. And a lot of times that kid turns out to be the best kid when you get them turned around. Yes.
My heart just aches for some of the things that we see, and we talked about some of the ills of society and some of the problems. That's just not going to go away overnight.
No.
And really, in some fathers' defense, they really never was taught. You don't go to college and take a class in Fatherhood 101.
Right.
So if you don't get a good foundation in church, and it doesn't always have to be in church, but if you don't have a good foundation, a good Christian foundation, or as you say, even another religion that has that discipline in place, or has that support in place, it can really be a very difficult situation for the father as well as the child, because sometimes growing up as a child, becoming a father, you're going to kind of look at how you were reared by your father, and and so you tend to follow that pattern. Is my point.
Right. Well, it's one of the problems, though. because, as I was speaking to the men at our last meeting, I was like, it's funny how back in the day we had all these marriages and all these men, and they stayed in these marriages, and men provided. The undermining of the mother was in the home.
So they saw the negative.
He could deal with it if it was in his home. Because if I come home and I have these situations, I can deal with the undermining what's going on in the home. Now, the undermining is government supported and backed, and it's out of the home. And so we say and we think, and we have dictated through medias and everything, that the mother is the best parent. And that is actually has developed into a syndrome that is causing little girls to aspire to be pregnant, because this is the only thing that they strive for that says that there's something. And then when we get into real statistics about, if we go into statistics about medium wealth of the black woman and the white woman and these other things, when we start getting statistics, that syndrome feeds poverty.
True.
And the problems, as we were talking about before. So it turns out that we need each other more today than we ever even recognize. And as long as we depend on those things, we'll keep raising the problems.
I agree with you, and then I'd like to challenge you on one thing.
That's
about
fine.
Single mothers.
Yes, that's
Some
right.
single mothers
Right.
have no choice. I'm not talking about the young
Right.
women that
Right.
go out to get a baby
Right.
because it makes them, they have this toy, or they
Right.
have someone to love.
Right.
I'm talking about women that don't have a choice because
Right.
the man wasn't there. They get a divorce and the man is nowhere around
Right.
to rear the children. So sometimes it's not a fault of the mother.
It's the other side of the syndrome. We never
Okay.
discuss it.
Okay.
See, so whereas the syndrome occurs where the mother is rearing the child alone, on the opposite side of that, the syndrome for the men has told him, walk away. He's done what he's taught visually, what he's seen, what he's heard. He's condemned. One of the things that men have the hardest thing to do is forgiving themselves. So walking away becomes the easiest thing I can do and totally detaching myself. Now, if we go outside of that syndrome and there was no love connection and this was just a thing that occurred and we have a child, it's so much easier for me to walk away from that than it is for me to walk away from my actual physical child. So the things that we're discovering more so than everything is that one syndrome of the single household, there's another side to that of the men walking away. That's a whole nother syndrome, and that's learned behavior.
Right.
That behavior is completely learned. If for any man that wants to be in his kid's life and he pursues it, right now the laws have begun to change more to co-parenting, and men are starting to get the kid from the mother, and they're starting to understand that their value. So that was part of the reason, is because way back then when a man would walk away, he had no value. What was his value? As a man, we say these things, as you were saying. A lot of times we say this is what a man should do. But if he's never taught, how is it something that he should automatically do?
Well, in defense of motherhood,
No, motherhood is beautiful.
yes, but the mother is often left with the responsibility, and she doesn't have that choice of walking away.
Well, I think she chooses. I think a lot of times women choose it
Okay.
versus allowing the kid, because mothers are nurturers by nature.
True.
So I prefer the kid to be with me versus allowing the kid to go with you. Men have to show themselves valuable in order for the mother to release her kids, their kids, to him.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? So a man has to, that's why time becomes the ultimate weapon in raising a kid. The more time I show, the more time we're comfortable, the more time co-parenting starts to work.
And I think one of the main problems that I see is you get angry, you get a divorce, or you break up, and they take it out on, the children suffer, but they're punishing the mother, or vice versa.
Right.
And really the children suffer. In your organization, Good Fathers Only Group, what is the greatest challenge? What is the greatest hurdle that you have to get over to deal with, to help men understand their responsibility. And we're not talking about all men. We know that there are some excellent fathers. We know that they're probably not given as much credit. But what is the biggest hurdle in helping young men to be good fathers?
The value to celebrate, to and embrace.
And you mentioned that earlier.
You know what I'm saying? It becomes the one thing that men, when you compare Mother's Day to men sit back and say, nobody has to, in this society, things are visual. If a kid sees you celebrating fatherhood, that gives him hope. Whereas if you devalue fatherhood in front of him, that teaches him despair. What would make me want to become a father based on how you do it? So based on how we do it, in celebrating it, my sons look forward to it. And that's a building relationship, because one thing that we don't understand about men build. We build, and once we understand about building and building relationships, things flourish. But that's one of the things that we have to get to. That's what I just noticed, that the men don't really, they say, we cliche everything, right? So, this is what I'm supposed to do. So why would I celebrate me being a father? Because there are no one that values your fatherhood. And the kids don't see it. The people don't see it. Like, what was the one key ingredient that really made me jump out here was I was no different. If you saw me walking down the street and saw the dude walking down the street at the same time, the first thought was not, there goes a good father. There goes somebody you can really, support and get behind. There goes someone. That wasn't the first thought. What was the first thought was, he probably don't care nothing about his kids. Look at him, he's laughing. Judgment had become heavy for men. It is a very heavy thing. And men deal with it different. And we can go into the numbers as far as suicide and everything else like that. It's horrific what's going on with men.
So what I hear you saying is that we need to celebrate fatherhood more.
Yes, ma'am.
That's basically.
Yes, ma'am.
And how do we do that with organizations like Good Fathers?
Well, I mean, we're going to bang. That's what we do. I mean, tomorrow in the Labor Day parade for our, this is our 6th annual fatherhood walk. Even across the country, they did the Million Fathers March, and men taking their kids to school. You can see the numbers all over the world getting involved with that, and so we just carving out our path on the celebrate part. The Million Fathers March is about taking men to school, men taking kids to school. First day of school, it cuts down on crime when criminals see fathers are involved in the school presence. Huge thing.
I would love to see just a big conference after conference after conference helping, and there are some across the country. There are several churches that do, excellent job. We don't need to name those, but we know that it's going on. But just to have some classes, and address some of the issues and give some instructions, because really sometimes we really do what we saw our parents do, or deal with it how we saw our parents deal with it. And I just think that would be.
Well, it's
or am I on the right track?
You're on the right track.
Okay.
It's funny because for us, we've been meeting, and we see the men. For us, we just got to learn to go with what we have instead of always pursuing, because what we're trying to do.
No, go with what we have.
Well, that's present. Men that's present,
Okay.
that's actively involved.
Okay.
We just got to learn. For us, that's what we got to learn to do, and continuously build our membership and things like that. But that's one of the things that's on the table for us. A huge Father's Day celebration, as well as our own conference. Last year this past season we participated in the first ever international men's conference on men and boys issues.
Wonderful.
First ever.
Wonderful.
Of its kind.
Awesome.
Right? And it was dealing with men and boy issues. And so many people attacked it. On one end, it was racism. On the other end, it was unions, and didn't even understand. Feminists got involved. Everyone was trying to attack it. And when I got the call, I was like, to me, this makes 100% sense to me. That men of all nationalities, races, colors, creeds, and all would come together to discuss the issues that plague men and boys. And we sometimes think that other cultures do not understand the dumbing down of our kids, right? Because we're over here in this little pocket, we say, like in the city, we would say, oh, DPS, they all just dumbing down the kids. Well, the truth of the matter is, it's happening all over.
Okay.
But because of the separatisms and the isms, we don't know this is a concern for Caucasians, Hispanics,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? Because of the isms, which we have to get away from, and men did it, and we have to eliminate it, but those things...
To break out some of those cultural barriers.
Break out of those cultural barriers and
Because
understand.
there's some basic issues that
Man,
still are the same.
When you look at one end, when we look at the black males, the murder rate, then you look at white males, the suicide rate. Then you look at Hispanics, the murder rate. And then you start looking at Middle Eastern, the highest in blood pressure, high blood pressure, diabetes in the world. So when you start looking at these things, you start saying that what's really killing us is being separate. And so this International Men's Conference was so powerful.
Wonderful.
I think I cried
Wow.
the first day because I actually heard people talking about, and it was a woman, Erin Prizzy, 45 years. She's been waiting on that day. That was so powerful because in England, she was removed from England and brought to the United States. And when she came to the United States, she was seeing the same thing. That there were this many women programs and nothing for
Nothing
men.
for men. You know, I think the church also has a great influence. I know I was sharing with you earlier after our pastor preached this today, Pastor Kinlock. He asked all the young people to come down and pray, and I think that is so important. We need so much prayer covering our kids
Right.
because of what they have to face.
Right.
Kids today we didn't have to face what they face today.
Right.
The pressure, not as much peer pressure. The exposure to such ungodly things today is so much prevalent,
Right.
so much more prevalent today than what you and I dealt with
Right.
when we were growing up. So I see the church as also having a strong influence.
Well, the church most definitely should. And here's why. Martin Luther King didn't move till the kids got involved. See? You have a number of times, I sat in a meeting where everybody got up and talked about what they went through, and there was no kids. And I just stood up and I was like, where are the kids? Where are the youth? Your story is your story. And that's good that you all went through that. But what are you teaching them? And the detachment, the distance between the elderly and the young is being played out in crime every day.
Well, most of the kids today can't even relate
At all.
to what
We're not
your era
involved.
was. Well, it was a totally different time.
Yeah.
And there's such a wide margin
Yeah.
of difference in when you were a youngster and the youngsters are today. Not saying that you're old, but a younger. It's a whole different world that they have to deal with.
Yeah.
The exposure to the internet and
We created it though.
We created it.
Yes, you got to think about
technology.
just go
advancements.
beyond technology advancement, and then listen, when you start talking about what we're teaching, right? The lack of teaching help continues to create the despair. The use of words, the N-word. Women openly accepting themselves being used, called the B word.
Yeah,
The unnecessary things that we allowed just to be friends based upon the way that the government said you can discipline your kids. I still discipline my kids. I run a strike 3. I teach people as much as possible. Talk to them, warn them, spank them. Bottom line, you have a better relationship. It's a better conversation. It's not abuse. It works. And it also helps the kid understand why are they being disciplined and to avoid the situation.
Well, sometimes they just are crying for the structure.
Yeah.
And they can't handle just being loose.
Yeah.
And I found that
That is
working with
real.
working with young people, they need the structure.
Yeah.
They need to know what's expected of them. And a lot of it is just poor self-image.
Yeah.
Based on some of the things that you've heard, I've heard, and seen.
Oh, see.
It's just, they don't feel they deserve any better. I've heard on TV some of the young men said, I didn't expect to live past 25 or 30 years
17,
old. It's
15.
crazy.
What you mean? I work with guys talking, man, I never thought I'd see 18. Right. That whole dynamic is because of the isms and the systems. We start pulling back, and we think that by being this way, we coddle and keep them right here. We're destroying them because there's so much we can learn from each other, which is the way God intended things to be anyway.
And just the dialogue helps you to see where they are and where they came from and why they are the way they are today.
Yeah.
So what's the answer, Mr. Mann? What's the answer to it's a big problem. And we were talking earlier before the show about Ferguson, and it's just so painful to watch.
Well, look how that was torn.
Yeah.
Look
The
how it was
media
torn.
has its bit on
Well,
it, yes.
not just the media, but just look how that whole Ferguson thing was torn, right? And look at how many people spoke up on it, right? And one of the things that amazed me was how many people started protecting other businesses, wouldn't let them destroy the business because people understood that you're destroying this business in my neighborhood. I need this business. Do not destroy this business. There were a number of businesses that were being ramshacked and everything. That's the difference between the educated and the uneducated and the people with common sense. Then you got the way that the media was divided. When you look at the Ferguson thing, then you have the whole dynamic of the people that wanted to support the cop, and they raised all this money to support the cop, who, basically they say he shot him 6 to whatever times he shot this kid.
Some say 6, some say 10.
Yep. Whatever the case may be,
excess,
right? Whatever the case may be, the circumstance that led to that is all part of the same things. We continuously in this country, in this world, we continuously take and think that because you are a certain skin color, that you have a certain dominance over a not so same skin type. And those things, those isms, allow the rich to play puppeteer, and we continue with wars and separatism. And while these wars is going on, money is being made hand over fist by rich people, and your study becoming a number. No one cared about that boy laying in the street for five hours or whatever. The cop, they showed clearly in the video where they're just standing around. Didn't cover him up or nothing. They're right in the middle of the kid's neighborhood. No one cared, came out, basically you got all these witnesses and all these stories, right?
But don't you
And
think
it's
that's
sad.
But I think a lot of people just don't want to get involved.
Well, I mean, you have no choice.
Yeah.
If you saw it, you have no choice. But now, do you tell it to sensate? Because of the isms, right? Am I telling it from a perspective that this was really a situation that was race? Or was this really a situation that was an attack? Or did this person really have no choice? Did the cop really pick on him first? You got so many things that have to be answered. But guess what's going to be at the base of it? Because you see all the marches, right? And they said, statistically, 96 black males are killed a year, right, by law enforcement. That's 96 too many, right? But since you are up, govern your backyard. Reduce the number of murders that's taking place by your own hand.
Exactly.
Create a value.
We talk about black on black crime.
Right. When you create a value for your children, a value, people respect value. We are showing on a daily basis that we devalue certain types of kids. And that's across the board. That's not just black, that's Hispanic, the whole nine. And the numbers match. What is taking place?
Well, I just listening and talking as we shared before the show and doing the show, I congratulate you on your work and what you're trying to do. to help fathers be good fathers. And I just think it's so important. I mean, there's so much to know. The Word of God is so clear about the father's role and how, and I understand that you go from various churches, just
Right.
to be present to let everyone know what's going on.
Well, I just don't think that God, I go because if I choose to go walk into this church, there's a message from me. And
Absolutely.
I go because
Absolutely.
I'm connected that way. And so if I walk into a specific church, there's a message there for me.
That you can help.
That just connects with me. Just like I told you when I walked in the church today, and we just launched that Win as One Detroit T-shirt, and it's for other cities and everything. And the whole purpose of that is to bring everybody together, like knock the barriers down. Let's really have a dialogue and discussion, but let's value our kids, because the system is taking our children, sending them off into these little wars. And you're not getting an opportunity. The rich kids, they're not going to war. Their kids they're not volunteering, stepping up. Republicans, Democrats, anybody that's involved in the White House, their kids not going to the war. They could care less about that now. It used to be that was something that you had to have, is a military background. They don't care nothing about that. So what's the connection is for us to value our children even more, you see.
But in order to do that, you have to be an example. You have to be a good father. You have to know how to interact with your children, and know how to be a good father and deal with the issues.
We just got to continue to create more and more dialogue and situations for men. And men, we got to learn to get along and incorporate and merge where it's not a situation. Pull back on some of the ego, but a lot of that I understand is hard, because that's what God takes men, and men lead. Men build villages. That's what I was saying about the value. Men don't know how powerful they are. Women still want an alpha male. They don't want a soft, docile man. They still want an alpha male. And so men have to be involved in building alpha males. And it's so important that God becomes a structure, regardless to whatever your belief system, God becomes a structure in your son's life. And so your son, who one day will go on, because you take on my last name, I don't take on yours.
That's right.
That whole dynamic in itself, men are trees, and we have to value them a lot more.
Well, I just as I said before, I congratulate you on your work. Tell us a little bit more about the march on tomorrow.
Well, we just,
what's going to be going on.
Basically, the last 6 years, we created our national pledge, which is today I pledge to get better, do better, and be the best 24/7 dad. And so we've chosen the Labor Day parade to do our walk. We started out at the back of the line, and then people enjoyed us so much they asked us to move, and we're up almost to the head of the line.
Okay.
And for us, it might be, the years vary. One year we had over 40 men. Next year we had 30. Last year we had like almost 30. So this year, whatever the case may be, we're doing this for prostate and colon cancer, because we found that men don't necessarily always walk away. Sometimes death takes them away.
Amen. Well, it's just been a pleasure talking with you, and we talked a lot on the phone, and we've just shared a lot, and we didn't cover half of what we'd like to cover, but we'll have to have you to come back and tell us how the march went, and just see what the progress with your organization in the future.
Oh, yeah.
And so I really appreciate all that you're doing for fathers to be the best father that they can be.
Yes.
And so I appreciate your work. So
That's
thank
no
you for coming and being a part of the show today.
Appreciate you having me.
And we will be praying that your work will continue in a great way.
Well, I think we'll be fine, and if anybody wants to get involved, we most definitely are open to that.
Okay. And real quickly, give us your email address and how people can get in touch with you.
You can reach me directly if you have any interest at 313-600-1515 or 313-332-3323, or my email address is goodfathersonlyllc gmail.com.
Okay, and your website is?
Is thegoodfathersonly.com. And we're getting ready to add about another 180 links and resources.
Amen. Praise God. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Mann, for
Well, thank
being
you.
today.
Have me.
Okay. This is the Barbara Gentry-Pugh Show, and we're happy that you were able to join us today. We'll see you on next time.